Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. As you can see, I am joined for the first time on the show. I'm very happy to welcome her, Rania Khalek from Breakthrough News. Rania, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining
Danny,
me today.
it's great to see you. I'm so happy to be on with you. It's good to catch up. I don't know what we're going to talk about because it's like there's just nothing going on, but
No,
whatever
there's
you feel.
there's too much going on. Well, let's start with this. Trump spoke at the State of the Union address. He said that he's interested more in diplomacy than war, but war is definitely on the table. But there have been some hiccups. Some have said that this war is really going down the toilet, so to speak, and somewhat literally, because the USS Gerald Ford, as you may have seen, is racked with plumbing problems. There's about these 600 toilets, a bunch of them, 4,600 sailors are down, and they had to actually dock in Crete in order to get a break. But I wanted to ask you about this because it's not being talked about, and people have questioned what the validity of this, but the Maritime Executive wrote this about it, about these issues with the plumbing on the USS Ford. And here it is. There have been reports that there have been foreign material induction over the course of this 11 month plus deployment of this ship, including t-shirt and mop heads, which were flushed down the toilet. Now, Ronnie, when I hear something like this, I hear perhaps, I mean, the Western mainstream media from NPR and Wall Street Journal is saying there are morale issues, but that's a very purposeful thing to do. So I'm thinking there may be some unhappy sailors not wanting to be on a ship that is going to war with Iran. Somewhat of a maybe soft mutiny, a passive mutiny, so to speak, to stop this. But I'm wondering what you've made of all of this, as we have 1/3 of the U.S.'s naval arsenal surrounding Iran and lots of talks of war. What do you make of this development?
I mean, I think it's really interesting. All we can really do is speculate, right? Like, I'm not talking to people on the ship, but yeah, that is definitely purposeful. It's one thing to like flush toilet paper and that caused problems. It's another thing for t-shirts to be clogging toilet pipes. And that would speak to some sort of intentional kind of sabotage on a collective level, given what has caused this problem of like American shit, if you will. But all that's to say, I mean, look, I would like to think, the optimist in me would like to think that there are people on this ship who recognize that this is a very stupid, purposeless war in many ways, because America cannot achieve its objectives. It's also criminal to carry out an act of aggression on this scale. I mean, this is the most military buildup we've seen from the United States since 2003 Iraq war days, with all of these aircraft and all of these aircraft carriers and everything that goes along with them just surrounding Iran. I think you said something like 30% of naval assets. I think I've seen numbers as high as like 40 to 50% of US naval assets surrounding Iran. Regardless of what the exact number is, it's just completely insane to, be going or attempting to carry out yet another disastrous war in the Middle East. We've seen how Libya turned out, how Syria turned out, how Iraq turned out. And they completely destabilized the region. And also, you could argue the entire world in many ways. You wouldn't have ISIS without the U.S. war in Iraq and then the U.S. regime change war in Syria. Iran is a country of 90 million people. It's a lot larger than Syria and Iraq. It has a pretty powerful military. It's like a regional power. And it has its own assets across the region. So it's not just a matter of like, this is a criminal act. It's also like, okay, if you're in the US military and you're not an idiot, you see that this actually poses a potential, like real material threat to US personnel across the region, because Iran has the ability to hit those US bases in various Gulf states, from the Emirates to Qatar to Saudi Arabia. They have the ability to, they have partners across the region like Ansar Allah and, partners in Iraq and, in Lebanon, who are basically on their team as a part of the axis of resistance that could also cause problems for the Americans across the region. So this wouldn't be some sort of cakewalk, and it would cause destruction to the US on some level. And so, yeah, if you're on an aircraft carrier and you're not an idiot, you would see the writing on the wall and maybe want to put whatever delay or stop to this that you could. I mean, that's the optimist in me. But also we have to recognize, I mean, these people have been on this aircraft carrier for like, 11 months, you said? We've seen the stories of, people not being able to see their kids for over a year at this point. And just, it sucks. Imagine being on a ship for 11 months. That sucks. They've been in the Caribbean and now in the Middle East. There's no break. So of course, morale would also be down. And you see your country's basically treating you like crap. And you're supposed to go, potentially put your life on the line. And for what? So the US can steal Iran's oil, so the US can have greater hegemony over the region than it already does. It's like the goals here don't even really make sense because they're also just not achievable.
Yeah. And it's a long deployment. We were heading into a year, and I'm sure that after the Venezuela debacle, that war crime committed by the Trump administration, kidnapping Maduro, I'm sure many of those thousands of sailors, those thousands of personnel on that aircraft carrier were thinking, this is it. We're going to go home. Mission accomplished. That's how the Trump administration painted it. But now they're in, they're in the Middle East. I believe they were in Crete. Now they're going to, I believe they're going to dock off of Israel. And but there are, this is a real thing. There are major warnings inside the Trump administration, Rania, of the chief of staff. Trump has said absolutely not. He has not been warned by Dan Raisin Cane. Every time I hear that, I'm like, Raisin Cane's like the
I know,
well, I don't know. Don't ask me. But he who is a big chest thumper around Venezuela, he came up. He said, "We did it. Look at this great operation." Now he's saying, no, Donald Trump, maybe don't attack Iran. And I'm sure this is getting down to the level of the sailors who are there being like, well, what's going to happen to us if there are major risks? The U.S. doesn't do good with risk. It doesn't do good with fight back, Rania. What's your assessment of that?
You're absolutely right. I mean, look, the U.S. is really good at breaking things. It's really good at bombing things. It's really good at destroying things. But then, you can't really control what happens after that level of destruction, right? And the U.S. doesn't really plan ahead, particularly this administration, by the way, which is especially like a short-sighted administration. So even this guy has a ridiculous name, this general who's warning Trump, he's not warning Trump out of like ideology because he doesn't like war. He's warning Trump because, okay, what are your goals? Let's walk this through. Are your goals to destabilize Iran? Are your goals to change the government in Iran? Are these things achievable? What would actually be the outcome? Well, the reality is, as this general is saying, is I think it was something like we only have the capacity for like 4 to 5 days of sustained like aggression against Iran, and then we'll start running out of certain pieces of equipment, right? And Trump, the thing is, Trump doesn't want to do this over months. He wants to do a one and done sort of situation. But you can't change the government of Iran in a one and done kind of situation. Even if you take out the entire leadership of the Iranian government, the Iranian government has prepared contingency plans for that. I mean, if you've read any of the pieces about Iran's preparations, part of their preparations include picking up to 5 different successors for various important positions. So that means that the U.S. can just like kind of, and this is something the Iranians and a lot of resistance groups across the region are very good at. They are very good at having successors and then successors to their successors prepared in the case of layered assassinations. So Iran has prepared for that. So like in that case, it's going to be very difficult for you to take out this quote unquote regime that you don't want to empower so bad. Plus, Iran has a big base of support in the country. Like, yeah, there are Iranians who don't like their government, but there are a good amount of Iranians who do support this government. And they have a very strong military that will fight. They also have pretty good weapons. Like it's not, it doesn't compare to the technological supremacy of the US. I don't think anyone compares to that because nobody spends $1 trillion on the military a year the way the US does. But Iran shouldn't be dismissed. I mean, there's a reason that Russia's been using Iranian drones in Ukraine since the war started there, because they work really, really well. And Iran has managed to, perfect their technology, and they can do damage with those drones. Iran has ballistic missiles, right? That's why the US and ballistic missiles can do a lot of damage. We saw what the damage they could do last year during the 12-day war with Israel, when the Israelis started to basically run out of missiles to intercept the ballistic missiles and other missiles that Iran was firing at them. So this is part of the reason why in the negotiations with Iran, the US keeps trying to put the ballistic missiles program on the table. They basically want to disarm Iran. Those ballistic missiles are a really important deterrent because they can do a lot of material damage. Iran has ballistic missiles. And again, like if the US were to ever sort of attempt raids or an invasion of Iran, they have a huge amount of people who have been organized to fight on Iran's behalf. And then also, we keep hearing about the US wanting to help protesters inside Iran. Well, there definitely are people, obviously, inside Iran who are like separatists, who would want to destabilize or even destroy the current sitting government. But when you have the US like unprovoked attack Iran, you're going to have a rally around the flag like you would in any country. And it would actually potentially just bring people together. So like what I'm saying is these are the conversations that are being had by serious people if they're trying to plan out a war, right? So this general's not an idiot. And that's why he's putting out these warnings, because he's like, it's one thing to kidnap Nicolas Maduro. Not saying that was okay. That was a horrible thing to do, obviously. But Venezuela is not Iran. Venezuela has been an extremely sanctioned country with almost no revenue coming in for a very long time now. They don't have the capacity to build up their military and their military technology the way Iran has. So it's much easier for the US to swoop into Venezuela, which is literally like in their hemisphere, and psychotically kidnap the president and his wife. It's another thing entirely when you're talking about a country on the other side of the world that is a major regional power. And that also, by the way, I'm not saying Russia and China are going to swoop in to save Iran. They're not. That's not how they operate. But they are very strong Iranian allies who sell Iran military technology as well. And that would play a role in this too. I'm sure this general is also talking about the fact that Iran is a country of 90 million people. And if you destabilize it, you are literally going to destabilize the entire region. You're going to cause huge refugee flows this way and that way. It's like you open a Pandora's box, you don't even know where it's going to end. And again, I would go back to the cases of like Libya, Iraq, and Syria to understand what happened there. So I'm not surprised that you have these warnings. The question is whether Trump will actually care to listen to those warnings. It's really unpredictable, I think. And if you just look at the material situation, I mean, why would you surround a country with that much military might if you don't plan to use it on some level?
Yeah. I mean, I've said it. It's all before. It feels like no matter how badly the potential outcome becomes clearer and clearer, to maybe this is being very generous, because it's becoming clearer and clearer to the Trump administration. Nonetheless, Rania, it's there. It's all there, and to pull out after encircling Iran in this way does not conform to, of course, U.S. exceptionalism and the doctrine of its own arrogance and total dominance, full spectrum dominance, and all of this. But Rania, I don't know if you saw the debacle of the State of the Union address, which was supposed to be, some believed, was going to be a major indicator of what the Trump administration, Donald Trump himself, was going to announce and do about Iran. All the mainstream media headlines were like, okay, well, what's he going to say about Iran? Well, it turns out not much, but here's what was said. So first, he briefed the Gang of Eight, a bunch of the top senators and congressmen of both parties, House leaders, Senate leader, etc. Here's what Chuck Schumer, who never saw a war he didn't like, had to say about after that meeting with Trump.
This is serious, and the administration has to make its case to the American people.
That's all he had to say. And then this is Donald Trump's few remarks he made about Iran and what's to come.
Some terrible people. They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue. They're starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Yeah, a lot of just straight up fabrications there. But as this war continues to look like it's going up in flames for the Trump administration, there still is, as you saw, a lot of support in the chambers of Congress there. Good majority of them, Republicans and Democrats, stood up for that, which sounded like WMDs on steroids.
Yeah, absolute ghouls. It's a room of absolute disgusting, barbaric, uncivilized ghouls who have spent the last 2+ years genociding Gaza happily. Genociding Gaza, and now are happy to expand that genocide into Iran because they're just imperialist, disgusting, uncivilized, barbaric ghouls. And you know what's wild? You said fabrications. I mean, one of the biggest fabrications, I mean, God, I don't even know if you can say the biggest because so many were the biggest, but one of those major fabrications was the idea that Iran still wants a nuclear weapon. Literally, I'm sure you saw just hours before the State of the Union, you had the Iranian foreign minister tweet out that Iran has no interest in building a nuclear weapon. And that's not the first time Iranian officials have said that. There's like a fatwa in Iran against building nuclear weapons. And many people argue that that's one of Iran's biggest mistakes. Perhaps if Iran had, in fact, built itself a nuclear weapon by this point, that would be a deterrent for the US not to invade, not to attempt to destroy Iran and try to overthrow the government. And I mean, I think North Korea is a perfect example of that. You haven't seen the US try with North Korea because that nuclear bomb that North Korea built is a deterrent. So all that's to say, that's an absolute lie, what he's saying. Another major lie was the idea that Iran has missiles or is building missiles that can hit Europe and the US, which is just an outrageous lie. Essentially, the Americans, and obviously you can see across the political spectrum, don't want Iran to have any weapons. They want a completely disarmed Iran, which is insane. It's insane for any country to not have or not try to have the ability to defend itself, because that's what having an army and weapons means. But they want to disarm Iran because Iran is a country that refuses to follow US edicts. It refuses to become a US client state. It has since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It has a massive amount of oil that, you know, as we know, when it comes to global South countries with huge amounts of oil, the imperial countries, is led by the US, want to take that oil for almost free and make a ton of money off of it. They don't want the people of that country to benefit. And that's why the US and the British overthrew the Iranian government, the democratically elected Iranian government, in 1953 and installed the Shah, a ruthless dictator whose son is now being promoted as a possible alternative to lead Iran. But all that's to say, I mean, that speech was just completely outrageous. And I think it shows you where Trump's head is at. It was neocon talking points to the extreme. And, you know, I don't think he really cares one way or another. Trump is just going in the direction of the yes men he's put around him. Right. And yeah, it's a really frightening moment because, you know, again, Iran is a country of 90 million people. The Middle East, the West Asia, is a region that has hundreds of millions of people living in it, including me. I'm here in Lebanon, right? And like, the amount of people who would be impacted by this in such a dramatically negative way, like it doesn't even register in the minds of these disgusting, barbaric, uncivilized ghouls who clap like seals for any war that their dear leader wants to launch. Yesterday it's Venezuela and Cuba. Now it's Iran. Who knows what it'll be tomorrow? But these people will just keep clapping for war like a bunch of psychos until there's like no country left. So you want to talk about the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world? That would be the United States of America, not Iran.
Yeah, not even close, says Donald Trump said. Not even close. It's, and the justifications for this, Rania, they're just falling apart. I mean, Donald Trump said we haven't heard those secret words that they won't build a nuclear bomb yet, but yet Iran has said from the very beginning, this always happens here. Iran has said from the very beginning, Rania, that they are not going to build a nuclear weapon. They don't want to build a nuclear weapon. This is Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who said, our fundamental convictions are clear. Iran will under no circumstances develop a nuclear weapon. Neither will Iranians ever forego our right to harness the dividends of peaceful nuclear technology for our people. So not surrendering, but no interest in nuclear weapon. It's literally the same day that the speech happened in public. Rather, forget the so-called negotiations that have happened. I mean, the justifications are looking more and more ridiculous as time goes on.
No, it's completely outrageous. And what's even crazier is it's so unpopular among the public. Like the American public, except for like the MAGA base, which I think no matter what Trump does, the majority of the MAGA base is just going to support him because it's just like a cult of personality, a fascist cult of personality. But you have an opposition party, supposedly an opposition party called the Democrats. And like they're silent about this. All you've heard from Chuck Schumer was that mealy-mouthed statement of, oh, he's gonna have to, sell it to the American people. The American people don't want this war. They're so uninterested in bombing Iran. What he did in Venezuela is incredibly unpopular. But you know what? I think I saw a poll. It was like 21% of Americans support a war with Iran. Like, that's crazy. So you're saying 79% of Americans are opposed basically to a war on Iran. And somehow this is still happening. Like, we don't live in a democracy at all. We have no say over foreign policy whatsoever. And you have this pretend opposition party called the Democrats that does not care. If anything, I think a lot of them probably support a war on Iran. That's one, because they hate Iran. They're also a bunch of imperialist ghouls. But I also think there's even another cynical thing at play here. And that is that, they recognize that this is unpopular. They don't want to put their names in opposing it because that can be used against them later. So why not just let Trump do this unpopular war, kill a shit ton of people, destroy the region, light it on fire, because who cares about those people over there? Let it become even more unpopular, and that'll help us win in the midterms.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's exactly what's happening. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have just started to now push for a vote, and they received absolutely zero support for this early on, and still they're having a hard time getting this vote actually to happen. And the Democrats, do nothing and win. They've obviously seen the Xi Jinping meme all over X, right? They think that's what can help them, but that can help them against Donald Trump since they are not proposing anything else and offering anything else. They even offered a CIA agent as the alternative to the State of the Union in the governor of Virginia, which was absolutely hilarious. But this is the poll. Only 20% of U.S. adults support Trump's war on Iran, and this poll was from the University of Maryland Critical Issues, released in mid-February. So it's very unpopular, Rania, and it's going to have massive consequences. I mean, going back to what, of course, we don't have access to be able to speak to those on the USS Gerald Ford, but when you see things like this, and I'm sure I'm sure they have access to X. I don't know how much access to X, but I'm sure they do. They might see things like this where Iran is literally practicing for the targets that they want to hit in U.S. assets in places like the UAE, which is just across the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, this is where we're at, Rania. To you.
Yeah, look, Iran is not a non-state actor that just has like light rocket technology and guns, and no shade to non-state actors, but a non-state actor is not an army, right? Like of a state. So they can't access the kinds of things that a functioning organized state like Iran can. Iran has an organized military. Iran has weapons. Iran makes a lot of its own weapons, despite being under sanctions. Iran buys weapons from Russia. It buys technology from China, and has like a partnership with those countries. So this is not just some militia that you can like bomb out of existence. There will be consequences to a war with Iran. That doesn't mean, the consequences are going to happen in the US, but the US has bases, massive bases across the region. You mentioned the UAE. They have a base in Bahrain. They have bases in Saudi Arabia. They have base in Qatar. They have, which last year the Iranians, after the US struck their nuclear facilities in a very calibrated retaliation, demonstrated its ability to bomb Qatar. And they calibrated it to do minimal damage, but they were also showcasing what they could do, as in they could do damage if they were serious about it and had to act. And the thing about Iran is, like, Iran has been always very reserved, which, again, this is a criticism of Iran that you hear in this region, at least, is that one of the reasons there's all of this buildup against Iran is because Iran has lost some of its deterrent capacity. Because in the past, when the U.S. has done things, beginning with the murder of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in early 2020, the Iranian response was very calibrated to do minimal damage so that it wouldn't provoke another response from the U.S., because Iran does not want a war, right? They call this like the strategic patience of Iran. And then all throughout the genocide in Gaza, as you saw escalation against Iran, whether it was the Israelis hitting the Iranian consulate in Damascus, the Israelis continuing to kill nuclear scientists, the Israelis killing Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And, now a lot of people believe that perhaps the helicopter crash of the Iranian president and foreign minister was potentially the Israelis as well. But whether you think it was or not, the point is, it's over and over, you see these acts of aggression against Iran, and Iran responding in a very minimal way in order to avoid the big war, right? But that's because Iran feels it has something to protect and more to lose than to gain by retaliating in a way that will provoke a big war. However, things have changed now, especially since the 12-day war with Israel last year. And now Iran's calculations will be that it's worth it to actually go to war if they're forced to, than to basically what the U.S. is demanding right now is surrender from Iran, which is like zero nuclear enrichment, and then also potentially like disarmament by like not allowing it to have a missile program. If they were to agree to that, they'd eventually be like agreeing to signing like their own death warrant. So in order to like survive, they would actually have to participate in a war. And there's a belief, especially with the people who took over from the leadership that was killed last year by the Israelis in the 12-day war, there's a belief that it's actually behooves Iran to just have the big war with the U.S. because the U.S. can't sustain a long-term war in the region, which, even that general who's advising Trump not to go to war believes to be the case. That's one. And also, it's so unpopular among the U.S. public that public opinion will make it impossible to proceed with a long war that would actually lead to the outcome the U.S. wants. So again, you saw that image that you showed of Iran firing a missile. They have the capacity to do that. They have the capacity to do it around the region. And they also have the right, by the way, to defend themselves from an aggressor. If this war does go through and the U.S. starts mass bombing Iran, killing senior leadership, perhaps killing the supreme leader of Iran, which, they have threatened to do and Trump is debating about doing. Let's say all those things actually happen, or you would see the U.S. media probably frame Iran's response as like terroristic or criminal, but actually Iran would have every right to respond to such a massive act of aggression. Oh, you're
Yes,
muted.
it would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. No, it definitely would, Rania, and that then points to maybe what you believe the consequences would be regionally, and maybe what the consequences have already been, given that buildup in and of itself is an act of war, and we've seen an act of war already committed against Iran and regionally by the U.S. and Israel. Dropsite News published this. They're saying that Israeli intelligence believe that the USS Gerald Ford can, despite the arrival of it, that the U.S. with all of this naval buildup can only sustain about 4 or 5 days of intense aerial strike and about a week of lower intensity operations after the warning from Raisin Kane, the Joint Chief of Staff of
Can't take that
Donald Trump. So that then begs the question: then what would be the consequences of this? Because it seems like this is where everyone is pushing toward, that at least something has to happen to Iran. There has to be at least some kind of strike, mulling limited strikes, quote unquote. But what are going to be the consequences, especially given all that you've covered too of what's already happening that doesn't always get attention, as this war builds up?
I mean, the consequences would be the Iranians hitting U.S. personnel across the region, and they are sitting ducks all across the region, and also the Iranians hitting the Israelis. That would be the consequences. And Iran has, like, these are actual weapons. The only reason you haven't had U.S. personnel being killed by Iran across the region before is because Iran has been the adult in the room, trying to avoid a big war. But if they're forced into it, if they're cornered, that's what's going to happen. They're going to hit U.S. personnel across the region on all those bases that I mentioned, whether we're talking about in Qatar, Bahrain. I think they'd be less inclined to hit Saudi Arabia, actually, just because the Saudis have been, like, lobbying against a war in Iran. And then they've said that they won't participate in allowing the U.S. to use their airspace, but also, who knows? The Iranians have basically said anybody whose airspace is used will be a target. Do you have U.S. personnel in Jordan? Like, I know the U.S. said that was pulling out of Syria. I'm not entirely sure if that's happened yet. You have U.S. personnel in Iraq as well. And, they can evacuate some of this personnel, but there's always people they're going to leave behind. And then you actually have the aircraft carriers themselves that are within Iran missile distance. So Iran can actually attack the aircraft carriers, which they've threatened to do quite openly. And they would have a right to do, because these aircraft carriers are in their area, aggressing against them. And then you also have Iranian partners in the region. I think the most likely to get involved right away would be Ansar Allah, which we know in the West as the Houthis. And they can cause problems in the Red Sea, as we saw them do throughout the genocide in Gaza. They can cause problems in the Gulf states, which we saw them do during the height of the genocidal war on Yemen, that basically the Saudis and the Emirates were participating in with the U.S., with the backing of the U.S. and the U.K. And you saw the exit of the Emirates after the Yemenis basically proved they could hit them. So they have the capacity to hit those places as well. And you'd likely see maybe that happen depending on how serious the threat against Iran is. You have pro-resistance groups in Iraq that could, it's less likely they'd get involved because there's a lot of political dimensions taking place in Iraq that would actually probably prevent them from getting involved in the way that they'd like to. But again, if it comes down to Iran fighting for its survival, these groups are partnered with Iran and they really need Iran to exist to continue to have support, to exist themselves in the region. So that would be an existential threat to them as a non-state actor as well. So they could potentially attack U.S. Personnel who'd be sitting ducks in places like Iraq. And then, people talk a lot about Hezbollah getting involved. I actually think that that's less likely to happen because of the fact that, the Iranians can hit Israel more than even Hezbollah can at this point. And Hezbollah also has internal Lebanese political dynamics at play that make it more difficult for Hezbollah to get involved in a war with the Israelis. I'm not so sure the Iranians really need Hezbollah's help here, but Hezbollah does depend on Iran in many ways as a partner. It's like the leader of the resistance axis in the region. And if Iran falls, that would be like a blow to Hezbollah's existence because Iran supports Hezbollah materially. So if it came down to something as serious as perhaps, oh my God, the Iranian government is going to fall if we don't get involved, then maybe Hezbollah would enter. But there's such massive consequences to that. Like you saw, you've seen the Israelis over the weekend. They killed like 12 people in airstrikes across Lebanon. Many of them were, some of them were Hezbollah leaders. that was Israel basically acting like a mob boss, showing that like if you dare get involved, that was a message. It's like if you get involved with this war with Iran, then like we'll do this times 100. And then they actually explicitly threatened, they sent a message to the Lebanese government explicitly threatening, if Hezbollah gets involved in this war with Iran, then we will destroy your civilian infrastructure, including your airport. So Hezbollah has to deal with like the population in Lebanon. So, you know, they're not just going to jump into a war with Iran or with the Israelis and Americans if there's a war with Iran and then basically piss off the country, because that's essentially what would happen in Lebanon. So they have to think about the political calculation, and really it depends how serious this war is. But also, again, I don't think the Iranians really need Hezbollah's help. Like Iran has ballistic missiles they can fire at Tel Aviv. You know what I mean? They don't really need Hezbollah's help in doing that. And unlike what the Americans frame all of these groups as acting as, they call them all proxies of Iran. I would call them partners of Iran, not proxies, because they make decisions and calculations based on what's, you know, in their best interest. And Hezbollah is going to make a calculation about what's in the best interest of them as a resistance organization and in the best interest of Lebanon. So we'll see what happens with that, but I just don't see them getting involved.
Yeah, and the Times of Israel, I guess the adversarial, literally, media, said this. They said, on condition of anonymity, Hezbollah officials said they will not intervene in event of a limited strike on Iran. That this anonymous official did say, though, that it will not intervene, militarily, but it would consider the assassination, any attack against Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, to be the red line. So that kind of goes in line with what you're saying, Rania, because that would be an extreme attack. And I've heard others say that, yeah, decapitation, an attempt to like literal regime change, just a wipe out, not kidnap. The mainstream media is even saying you can't kidnap the supreme leader of Iran because people will fight. They're far more militarized than even Venezuela was around him. It would lead to
Danny. I want to say one really quick. I want to say
ahead.
one quick thing. Sorry, but I want to just add something. If the U.S. really does kill the supreme leader of Iran, they are going to cause like a Shia backlash across the region, possibly into Pakistan as well. By the way, like this is not a joke. Like the way these American idiots are just like, yeah, we could just kill this leader or that leader, no consequence. I just want to throw that out there. Like, and also if they do kill the supreme leader of Iran, like there is like in Shia theology, this guy's first of all in his 80s. I think being martyred would probably be something that like at that age, it's like, what a way to go out, because it would also like inspire other people like to like avenge, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just like the Americans are so dumb if that's really what they're gonna do. And also like he's picked a successor to his successor to his successor. So it's not like you kill him and it's game over. But sorry, continue. I just wanted to throw that out.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, that's the red line that's been drawn, and it's a pretty big one. And I just imagine that if Iran has the capacity to hit, let's say, the military bases that house 5,000 U.S. troops just in the UAE alone, just the economic backlash to this too that we haven't gotten into. I know that you follow the fragility of global U.S.-led capitalism, but any major war like this that has the capacity to really disrupt oil, production, sale, distribution, that will cause quote unquote investors to tighten up real fast. And we could see a very catastrophic situation economically, mainly for Trump and of course politically, and then of course economically for the rest of us.
Yeah. And then don't forget these Gulf states like the Emirates, the Saudis, like first of all, the Emirates specifically, their entire existence as like a comfortable place for all these people from around the world to go live and invest their money in, is premised on its safety and stability. So if you take their safety and stability away, it's actually a threat to their existence. And so these people are also very close to Trump. So I could imagine that there's conversations happening in the background that might not prevent strikes on Iran, but would prevent or maybe, act as a mitigating factor against a long war on Iran because of what it would mean for the stability, the economic viability of a place like the United Arab Emirates or these other Gulf states that have very tiny populations. And like their entire existence and success is really premised on their ability to be these like islands of stability and safety and luxury in a region drowning in economic chaos and war.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rania, there has been, I think, an interesting reaction from even the ruling classes, those who are very skeptical about what the possible fallout of this war would be. It's going around in the mainstream media, and I found this one the most interesting because it kind of harkens back to Chuck Schumer saying Trump needs to explain himself to the American people. Here, those at Politico are saying that the Trump administration has not communicated effectively what the hell this war really is all about. And they cited multiple instances. They cited FDR during World War II, right? The good war. There was a whole narrative about that. Vietnam, it was all about we were attacked, right? The massive buildup. They were building up before that. There was definitely U.S. involvement before 1964, but after the false flag of the Gulf of Tonkin, you had a massive buildup. And then they talk about 9/11, of course, which I think we don't even need to explain how that was how those wars were justified because of that attack on U.S. soil. So nonetheless, the Trump administration finds itself, I think, also facing a big legitimacy problem and having to over and over again, let me just play J.D. Vance, over and over again having to push narratives as if to prime people to get ready for a war that not many people are buying.
It's very simple. I think most Americans understand that you can't let the craziest and worst regime in the world have nuclear weapons. That's what the president is accomplishing. That's what the president has set as our goal. He's going to try to accomplish it diplomatically. But as we all know, Bill, the president has a number of other tools at his disposal to ensure this doesn't happen. He's shown a willingness to use them. And I hope the Iranians take it seriously in their negotiations tomorrow, because that's certainly what the president prefers.
So, over and over again saying, well, we'll just use war because Iran's such a terrible regime that's not listening to us, that's not capitulating to us. But that's the narrative they keep having to push. But a lot, even in the establishment, are saying, I don't know if that's good enough. Maybe it's good enough for them, but I don't think it might not be good enough for the world. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, God, J.D. Vance is such an absolute clown with zero backbone or morals. He just wants power and he will like do whatever. Because I don't know if you remember, Danny, but like a few months before he became vice president, he was like making these speeches about restraint. I think he gave like a speech in front of the Quincy Institute or something all about restraint and how he's this like kind of like opposed to war voice in the administration. But the guy is just a yes man tool. I mean, a few years ago, he was calling Trump a fascist, and now he's his vice president. He has zero principles and is just an absolute clown. But all that's to say, I mean, yeah, they're having a terrible time crafting a narrative. It's kind of hilarious in a really dark way, because it's like you have articles like that Political article you just showed, which just demonstrates to you that the ruling class of the US, the Chuck Schumers, the corporate media, they're like, we would love to help sell this war for you, but you're not being clear about your reasons, because they're not, because they don't really, there's like reasons all over the place. It's like one day it's the nuclear thing, one day it's the protesters, one day it's the ballistic missiles program, and one day it's just Iran refuses to capitulate, just generally speaking. Another day it's state sponsor of terrorism. And because they're just all over the place, they haven't bothered to really craft, proper PR around selling this war. And so even these like ghouls, these imperialist warmongers that like are in the pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post are kind of like shrugging their shoulders like, bro, this is super unpopular. And you're not even giving us like clarity. I was listening to, because I consume a lot of mainstream media, as you do, right? Like to just know, like, to have like your finger on where the temperature of the ruling class is, right? So I was listening to this like New York Times podcast this morning that kind of gives you a rundown of the news. They were talking about the State of the Union, and these two guys who sound exactly the same, and I couldn't tell you what their names are because they're just like generic mainstream New York Times people, are having this like very NPR sounding conversation.
Right.
And one of them is like talking about what Trump said about Iran and how it wasn't a lot, and how like it's unclear the reason. And that's the problem, is he's not being clear about the reason. And then the other guy was like, I almost always agree with you, but this time I have to disagree because I think the reason was clear and it was the nuclear weapon. But they were just struggling. My point is they're struggling. They're like telling this administration, please explain to us just one talking point that we can all run with. And then I think that's why you have Chuck Schumer coming out of that meeting being like, he's going to have to explain it to the American people, because he came out of that meeting being like, he didn't even really give me the talking points I needed. So if anything, that's like a benefit to those who oppose war, is the fact that this is just like a very chaotic administration that doesn't really think things through, because Trump kind of wants to bulldoze into everything. And that's why his narrative on Venezuela, his narrative on Cuba, his narrative on Iran, even though he's harsh and insane and causing so much destruction and suffering, it's like not sitting with people the way it usually does in America, because you'll usually have a proper propagandistic build up where everyone is singing the same tune from across the political spectrum about why said country needs to be destroyed or brought to its knees. And in this case, it's just not happening. And that's what's offending the sensibilities of all these liberal imperialists.
Yeah, very, very well said, Rania. Then, in your estimation, what explains, I found this period, even dating back to the Biden administration, of course, with the whole, genocidal rampage after October 7, 2023. But even under the Trump administration, we've witnessed a real acceleration. But it's an acceleration that it's almost as if when you go too fast, if a train is going too fast, it can kind of speed up or have to maybe put on the brakes a little bit. So you have this real fast acceleration leading to possible disastrous consequences. There are rumors that even the Venezuela operation wasn't all that it was supposed to be, that there was supposed to be a lot more involved than simply just kidnapping Maduro, that there was supposed to be a major institutional upheaval and shakeup that they just couldn't do, mainly because they're going so fast. I mean, the Trump administration has been going so fast toward these wars, and now this is a big one. This is a major war with global catastrophic consequences. Why do you believe the U.S. elites, the foreign policy establishment, and all those who are the donors to it, why are they so rapidly going toward this trajectory, do you think?
Oh, I mean, that's a really good question. And I mean, I think it's a crisis of capitalism, a crisis of imperialism. I'm not, an economist, but I interview a lot of them. I know you do too as well, Danny. And there seems to be this consensus that the US is not the economic hegemon that it was 20 years ago because of the rise of China. And the US feels incredibly threatened, even though it still controls everything. It still has US dollar dominance. It has less of those things. And the trajectory is that China is shooting up and the US is declining. And so it's like turning inward, which is, that sort of these fascistic characters coming into play, people like Stephen Miller, the people around Trump who are like running his policies that have very fascist Nazi-like tendencies. It's like this empire in decline, if you will. And I don't know if decline maybe is the right way to say it, because it's still very powerful. Like the US spends $1 trillion a year that we know of on its military budget to literally militarily control the world, to bend it to its will very violently. But it's still declining, I guess, the trajectory economically, it's declining. So it feels this crisis that it has to like do everything in its power to crush any force of resistance anywhere to build up to the big war with China. And on top of that, I think that October 7th shouldn't be dismissed as a really important inflection point in many ways that sort of like transformed the character of US imperialism to a more barbaric form. Because in a sense, I mean, you had this like supposedly, comparably to the US or to Israel in terms of, military might, a very weak non-state actor, Hamas, put up this fight against this, tool of US imperialism in the region that has access to all the highest amounts of military technology imaginable. They managed to kill a lot of Israelis and carry out this operation that pissed off and freaked out the imperial powers that are aligned behind the US. And they had to crush them as hard as they possibly could with a genocide. And that wasn't just to crush the Palestinians. It was also, I think, a show of force to the entire global South. Like, if you stand up to us literally in any way, we're willing to kill all of you in a really insane, genocidal, maniacal, like horrifying, barbaric, like colonial style way. And so I think since then, it's just gotten worse and worse. I think you also have this kind of move towards the right around the world because of the right-wing oligarchs that are in control. These like really fascistic people like Peter Thiel and sorry, my phone made noise. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
Adam Karp, how about that guy?
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen this.
No, these guys are like These guys are crazy fascists, right?
Yeah.
And they don't like democracy because they recognize. I mean, you hear Alex Karp saying it. And you hear Peter Thiel saying it. They don't like democracy because it's like doesn't work with what they want for the world anymore. It did for a period of time because they could kind of control the narrative and bend everything into how they wanted it. But that's when you have like this kind of violent fascism come into play, is when the masses of people are like, something's not right with this system. This is not working in our favor anymore. And you kind of have upheaval, demands for more rights, all of these things. You have these like right-wing oligarchs that literally control the entire means of communication. Even the apps that we use, like, to put our shows up, to put our content up, is controlled by these forces. And that's why, like, you'll have CNN's crappy content that nobody really likes just be force-fed into your face, whether you like it or not. Right. Well, like, independent media is just kind of struggling to be heard and to be seen. But all that's to say, I think it's really like, to go back, I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I feel like it's really related, is to go back to what you said is like, why is the US accelerating? I think it feels very threatened. The US ruling class feels very threatened, and they're not entirely in agreement for how to deal with those threats. But they still agree that there is a threat, and they still agree that they need to control everything. And so right now you have this sort of like gunboat diplomacy returning because that soft power doesn't work the way it used to anymore. So it's like everything needs to be done at a barrel of a gun. And it's really like under Trump, it's just more ridiculous because he's like a cartoon character, reality TV show star. That's like his policies are being formed by people like Stephen Miller. But all that's to say, I think it's going to get worse. I think there's no other way but worse because there's a few things happening. I mean, this is not like past empires, right? We're in the 21st century where you have the weapons of 2026. And they're really, really scary, and they're capable of destroying the world. And, even if not destroying the world, destroying a lot of things and a lot of people all at once, right? And that's what the US controls. That's the military hardware that the US is in control of. And that, and then you have a world that's really scared of the US. Like, the countries are either aligned with the US ideologically, like the Europeans, who are just like vassal states at this point, and then various client states across Latin America and the Middle East and Africa and Asia and all these places. But even with like mass popular movements and even, the governments that still act as like forces of independence in these places, it's really hard to stand up to the US. And that's why it's even scarier, because like you look at what happened in Venezuela, for example, and the regional response. The regional response was really muted. Like, it's actually sad how muted it was. It's like Venezuela's on its own, Cuba's on its own. We're all too scared to piss off the Americans. Or it's like right-wing governments led by people who are like Trump, like Milei in Argentina.
Right.
And you could say the same for like the rest of the global South. And so I think we're in a moment where, people talk about a multipolar world, but it's not so much a multipolar world as like the Americans are still so powerful and have like militarily speaking and have control over so much. And there's not really an ideological challenge to the US where you have a lot of people around the world with government backing who are like a bloc that are opposing the US. You have like China as an economy, you have like the Russians as the Russians, but like it's not like communism, right? It's not like when you had a Cold War and there was literally like blocks of countries that were aligned together ideologically, not just aligned because they oppose US dominance over everything, because that's not an ideology. That's just a common interest. So I think it's just a really scary moment. Like, and so people talk about US decline, and like, I'm all for the decline of empire, the most violent empire in the history of the world. I'm all for it, but I don't think it's that simple, because I feel it's like this sort of US empire is run by maniacs who are like willing to take the entire world down with them if they don't have their way.
Yeah, well, I think that's I think the big factor here that you are mentioning is that is nuclear weapons. I think that this is what makes a lot of development away from the United States very complicated, because the more you accelerate, the more you confront, and the more you confront, you have the United States as the only, and maybe you could say Israel, I'm sure, but Israel hasn't actually used them, although it is certainly likes to talk out of the side of its mouth.
I think they'd be happy to.
Right? Yeah, well, it talks out of the side of its mouth about possibly using them in the Samson option or whatever they call it. But nonetheless, the U.S. does have nuclear weapons. The U.S. has used them in the past, and that I think is the constant workaround, right? So you do have, I think, a major limits to. I think the major limit right now for the United States empire is that its violence just doesn't really work to arrest certain kinds of development. It can't arrest China. It can't really arrest Russia militarily. It can't arrest even Iran, which is supposedly the weaker link of the three, but it can't do any of those things. So ultimately, the more you push away from the U.S., however, ultimately the U.S. empire starts to think about the nuclear option, which, you know, in my estimation, is likely a huge consideration, which, again, I think the countries that you just mentioned are very well aware of. They're very aware of that, which is why we are kind of where we are, which is, you know, watching the decline, but also, you know, living through the sputters of what comes next.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was telling you before we started recording, it's like last year was so insane. I can't even remember it anymore, because 2026 has like the acceleration has gone into like hyperspeed, because it's just like January 3rd, they kidnapped the sitting president of a country. Like, it's like one thing after another every day. It's just every day, everything at once, all the time. But it also, I think, does like, I don't mean to say it's like some guarantee the U.S. controls and wins anything. I don't think that's the case at all. I just think the U.S. is incredibly violent and scary and destructive. But I also think this is not sustainable. Like, this is not okay, and it's not sustainable. And I think this is why it's more important than ever that there is like backlash inside the U.S., which is what you saw happen over ICE, right? Like, you saw this sort of mass uprising against ICE. And I think we need more of that style of in the US of like pushback, of resistance, because it's like everyone else has a gun to their head all around the world. And, you know, they're continuing to push back. They're continuing to like, you know, people are continuing to organize, but like the people who are inside of the US who actually have like some semblance, and I know it's just a tiny bit, but some semblance of a little bit of control over what that country does, have a duty to be organizing and showing up and being in the streets and pushing back against these disasters. Because I think if the ICE stuff has demonstrated anything, it's that imperial boomerang. It's like when these psychos accelerate around the world, they also accelerate internally, which is what we see happening inside an increasingly decrepit United States. It's just completely insane.
Well, Rania, it was great to be with you today. I want to make sure everyone knows that your podcast Dispatch is in the video description for after this show is over. They can check it out. Is there anything else you want to plug before I let you go?
I really appreciate you plugging Dispatches. Please, everybody who's watching, go follow Breakthrough News. We have regular independent media content that's really great. I host a show there. Lots of other amazing people do too. If you like Danny's content, you'll probably love our content. So go subscribe to Breakthrough News so you can make sure you watch.
Yeah, of course. Well, Rania, have a good evening. I hope to talk
Thanks,
to you again
Danny.
soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So without further ado, we have our next guest here, Stas Krapivnik. Stas, are you there with us? Hey, can you hear me? Oh, your connection seems to be a little.
Yep. I am
Okay.
here.
I think it's clarifying now, but there is a bit of a connection lag, maybe. Can you hear me okay? I can see you now more.
I can hear you fine. Occasionally,
Okay.
you even move.
Okay. Yeah. There's a little bit of a connection. Hopefully that clears up. Stas, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
Good. In these trying and exciting times of the brown goo apocalypse that's grabbing American warships, we shall hope that it doesn't mutate and eat the whole world. You've seen that movie, The Blob.
Yeah.
It's hard to fate for humanity.
Well, let's get right started then, Stas. I wanted to begin with this. So you might have seen the reports here. And I wanted your reaction to all that's been happening at the buildup with Iran, but this major development here, which is that Iran is getting ready. It says on the verge of finalizing an agreement with China to acquire advanced anti-ship cruise missiles, which would significantly alter the military balance in the waters of the Islamic Republic as the U.S. concentrates naval assets there. This is what Reuters was reporting. Supposedly, these are Chinese manufactured CM-302 supersonic anti-cruise missiles, the export version of the YJ-12 supersonic ASCM. So, again, this always happens. Let me just remove this. Actually, how about you react to this and I'll pull it up once more because that was an error there. So essentially, Iran is about to purchase these anti-ship missiles. Could you go into any details about this and your reaction to developments regarding the U.S. war with Iran as it apparently seems to go up in flames or maybe down the toilet, so to speak?
Well, I think the chances of war are still pretty damn good and probably are getting better by the day. The unfortunate part is, and Trump's little State of the Union address, I can't say that. It was like an hour and a half or something like that. Longest speech ever made in the State of the Union in the Union. The donor class is obviously pushing hard. Everybody else is obviously pushing hard. The only real standing ovations Trump got from both parties when he was talking about war with Iran. The Hill, everybody wants war. Guarantee you, when things go south, they'll all divorce Trump in a heartbeat. Starting with Lindsey Graham and the rest of those rats, because that's what rats do, and that's both parties in the U.S. Are equally rat infested. Now, Iran is doing, it's doing what it needs to do. It's getting the anti-ship missiles. They're going to close the. First of all, they said flat out, we're going to close the ports, the Straits of Hormuz. And that's going to be a disaster for a lot of countries, including the countries, American allies in the Gulf states, if it lasts any bit of longer than a couple weeks. Additionally, and Europe's just screwed. Europe is screwed any which way this goes. So they're facing literally running out of oil and gas. In fact, De Welt actually had an article to this week that said, 3 months without oil and Germany collapses. And it will collapse because it won't have diesel. It won't have petrol. And it won't have a lot of gas because the second biggest gas supplier in Europe, or to the European Union, the concentration camp of countries or peoples, is Qatar. And Qatar has to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So yes, they're all facing economic holocaust, which they well deserve. I mean, this is how ridiculously stupid these people are. There's an American LNG tanker that was heading north, taking the northern route to Germany, got stuck in ice. So the Germans send their diesel icebreaker, when they have, it gets stuck in ice. Well, you kind of
Stas, I don't mean. Can you hear me? I don't mean to interrupt you, but there is a bit of a static. Some people are saying tinny, but I'm hearing a lot of static on my as you talk. Is there any? I don't know if there's any issues with the microphone before I can? We continue?
Well, I'm using the phone, so if it
Okay.
continues, I can try throw this over onto my computer. I'm gonna close the computer down. My laptop. That's not too far. It may be interfering.
Okay.
It sometimes does things like that.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Take your time.
Yeah, sometimes the magnets and with the microphones they'll interfere if there's another magnet around. So yeah, so you know, I mean, it's the same thing as Iran just bought 500 Verba man pads from Russia with 2,500 missiles, and these things can take down low-flying cruise missiles. Not to mention planes and big drones and so on. Iran is doing what it needs to do. It's preparing for an all-out war. See, the U.S. approach here, even if the U.S. doesn't go after, try to knockout blow, that is, destroy the nodes of power in Iran, of the government and society, and then try to have its proxies rise up and take everything. Well, one of the approaches that the empire does is small strikes, death by 1,000 cuts. See, we're not really after a big war. We'll just hit a few places. And yeah, you can hit one or two of ours. But they keep doing this as they're degrading an enemy country. We'll just keep pushing and pushing. And Iran said very properly was, we don't give a damn if you do a small strike or we do a big strike. We're going all out. That's the only way you can talk to the psychopaths that populate Washington, New York, Los Angeles, for that matter. London. These people are certifiably insane, delusional, just absolutely cut off from reality in their own little chambers of echo chambers. So Iran needs to. I mean, there's two games at play here. I mean, these negotiations are pointless. They're not going to lead to anything. But while they're going, I mean, the U.S. is stationing as much equipment as possible. It's not just a matter of station equipment. I mean, you can fly an air wing in relatively quickly. An air wing of F-35s is 24 planes. They all take off. They all fly over. They get refueled en route. Maybe they land somewhere and get refueled, and then they land in Israel or someplace like that. It doesn't take long. But what are they carrying? So it takes longer to get the missiles, the spare parts, the fuel into place. For them to be able to fly more than just one sortie or half a sortie if they don't have enough fuel. You get the fuel tankers in, you have to have the fuel, obviously, to fill them up so they can do air refueling. All of that takes time. And the Gerald Ford and its quite little shit show has just arrived in the Eastern Mediterranean. I was a naval guy actually suggests, I don't know if it's true or not, that this may be a soft mutiny, and they're flushing T-shirts down the toilets to clog it up and force the ship to go to port. I don't know. I can't prove it one way or the other, so that's just somebody's opinion who was in the Navy. But either way, they're stationed equipment. Of course, Iran very properly isn't sitting on its laurels. It's not only building missiles, not only camouflaging, not only putting camouflage nets up and anti-drone nets, but Russia and China are just massively pumping stuff in. And just the other day, Washington off.
I'm losing your connection.
Flew somewhere, popped back up in Tehran. So
I'm losing you.
Okay, I'll try it on my computer. I was just on doing an interview and absolute normal connection. I don't know what's going on. Let me get on. I'll toss it over to my computer and come back on.
Okay, sure thing. All right, see you soon. All right, everybody. So we will wait for Stas to return. Unfortunately, there was major breakup. Hopefully, we will see him back soon on the same link. But yeah, no, I mean, I think given that the Maritime Executive, I pulled that up earlier, the Maritime Executive was talking about T-shirts and other unidentifiable or other objects that generally don't go into the toilet being in the toilet, these vacuum toilets that have this archaic technology that can't really handle toilet paper even. It seems to me that the morale there might be a real big push to. I don't know what the feelings are on the USS Gerald Ford about the war in general, but if you're talking about over a year at sea, and this is way over the normal deployment time, it's not clear why you have been there that long. It seems to me that there could be major, major, major problems in terms of morale, which could then lead to a kind of you could call it a soft mutiny. They just want to go home. They want to go number 2 in a toilet. They want to rest in a bed that's not on a hunk of metal that is gearing up for a war that could go very badly, and that could actually destroy that very aircraft carrier. All of these things are just natural human responses, and I've seen some people say, "Oh, this is probably just malfunction and all of that," but I could see it very well being the case otherwise. So we are now going to get back to Stas in a second. I see him preparing backstage. So I'll put him on when he is ready. But yeah, no, this is a very, as Stas said, a dangerous moment. We are definitely, there's definitely going to be a war of some kind and a strike of some kind, because the U.S. has had Iran as a target for a very long time, so it's only a matter of time. But I'm going to bring Stas in now. Stas, I see you, my friend. Anyway, you could back up a little bit. Hey, any way you could just back up your camera just a little bit so I can because yeah, your head. Okay, there we go.
My head's bigger than the screen.
Yeah. All right, sir. Well, how about let's get I know we've been speaking for a while. There was some breakup. How about we get to the situation at hand? You know, you were talking about the USS Gerald Ford Poopgate, as well as the likelihood of a strike and all the conditions that are currently in place for that, and Iran's response. So back to you.
Yeah, Larry Johnson wrote one to me. We're buddies, and he wrote me one. I guess that the Gerald Ford really does have a poop deck. So soft humor. So the conditions are ripe from the U.S. side, and Iran is doing everything it can to prepare itself, which is the right thing to do. I mean, this is I don't know what the American side is. They're always, I don't know, they kind of expect you to just sit there and wait. I mean, Venezuela kind of sat there and waited, but Venezuela has a different dynamic because unfortunately with Latin American countries, they're starting from the Roman Empire as the cultural base. They have a problem with generals always want to become emperors. So there's always somebody you can buy out or try to buy out. It doesn't quite work that well with Persians. It doesn't quite work that well with Slavs. So it's different cultural dynamics. So yeah.
Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. So I hit the brick wall. So yeah, Iran is preparing. I mean, we're gonna see, you know, what the U.S. goes for. Like I said, I got a feeling they'll either take one or two strategies. These death by 1,000 cuts like they did last time. We'll just hit something and you hit something, but it's building up social pressure, and then they do the currency and some of that, or they'll just go try to do a knockout blow and destroy the nodes of power. You know, government, police, military, electrical substations. Which, you know, they're screaming about Russia doing that in Ukraine. America, that's the first thing they do in any country if they're serious about it. They destroy the electric power. They even have bombs that drop aluminum foil, cut aluminum foil that air bursts and then falls on these substations and shorts them out. So
yeah. Yeah. Stas, there's still a bit of a connection issue. You are kind of freezing in and out. I don't know if there's a way, maybe if there's a way to optimize your internet connection to any degree, or
this one right now is on cable internet, so I don't know why it's. I was just interviewing Kinko, and we had a great connection. I don't know why.
I don't know. With StreamYard, there might be some issues here. I don't know what's going
Yeah, we
on.
were on Zoom, so Zoom was a great connection.
Right.
No issues.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. I mean, how about well, let's try to continue
Yes.
for a little while longer. People are also saying your microphone is a bit muffled. I don't know if there's a way to is it your laptop microphone that you're using at the moment?
No. It's a mic.
Mm.
I may be too close to it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's continue then.
Mhm.
Well, Stas, you know, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about the Russia-China factor here, because and if you could maybe talk, if you know anything about these anti-ship missiles from China. I know that Iran already has anti-ship missiles, but a lot has been made about the satellite technology, all of this. What kind of difference will this make in a conflict with the United States? How much does it factor in the U.S. is delaying things? Because there has been quite a bit of delay for the United States around this strike.
Right. The original strike, they wanted somewhere around the 14th of January, 15th of January. And General King that came in there, and we don't have the capacity to do what Trump wanted, which is fast strikes, in and out, in and out. And Iran would more likely go for a war of attrition. And if it goes for a war of attrition, the U.S. is going to lose. It just does not have the missile stocks for anti-missile missiles. It doesn't have the capacity to stand in the field for a long time. It doesn't have tender ships that can bring in more ammunition, more fuel to the Navy that's out to sea. So even if the Navy is not hit, it's going to run out of ammo once it fires off its missiles. So now it has to go to a port to refuel and rearm. Diego Garcia is probably the closest port it can sail off to, and that's going to be 3-4 days in one direction. Reload in 3-4 days at least, if not more, heading back. It's logistically, it's not exactly the best situation, because particularly the biggest American port in the area happens to be in Qatar. So yeah, that's going to be one of the first things hit by Iran in a counterfire. So that from that situation. But the equipment that's been bringing in, particularly air defense systems, that's very interesting. Russia's bringing in the S-400s, and what the S-400 does, as opposed to just like the S-300 or the HQ, which is the Chinese, or the Bavar, which is the Iranian homegrown system, is the command and control block in each battery. The command and control center, it can integrate all these other systems under it. Can also integrate the MiG-29s and the Su-35s that Russia's been bringing in. And believe me, I am very sure that there are not Iranians sitting behind the controls of these. It takes a while to prepare officers, more than a couple months. So more likely there's going to be Russian crews and probably quite a few Russian pilots in these planes. And what the system can do is it integrates all of that together into one sector array. So it can communicate the Russian S-400 command and control blocks for each of these batteries. They can track 72 targets, and they can service 36 of those targets. And by service, I mean engage. That's Army neutral talk service. But they can engage 36 targets, and that's per battery. So if you've got 4 or 5 batteries, you've got 4 or 5 command control posts, and each one of them can carry a sector, so they can integrate all the other air defense systems, aviation, and then you start getting this umbrella. And the integrated umbrella is where you see a target. You see a target 500 kilometers out. Your first line and your strategic line of air defense initiates contact with that target. If the target's not destroyed and it passes further in, it hands that off. It hands that off into the next level of your defense directly. So you're never losing control, or you're never losing tracking of that target. Even as it gets closer and closer inside the umbrella, there's different levels that start to engage it, all the way down to a guy with a Verba on his shoulder going, "There's a low-flying, slow cruise missile called, yeah, I'm going to pop a missile into it, and see what happens." Down to that point. But that's a synthesis right there. That's a synergy that we haven't seen before, because it's got Chinese and now Iranian system. But it gets better because the Chinese have now brought in their Baidu radar systems, which are bleeding edge technology, and they're directly tied with a big network of Chinese satellites, which by the way can also integrate missiles and give them direct targeting, which by the way the anti-ship missiles come in, because they're not, you're shooting cruise missiles or hypersonic missiles, which are basically very, very, very fast cruise missiles because they can be maneuverable. If you're just shooting them into an ocean, because the U.S. fleet's not going to ever come into the Persian Gulf, it's a suicide, it's a death vault. They're going to stay out in. They're going to stay out. I'm sorry for that. They're going to stay out in the Indian Ocean and maneuver out there and then launch sorties. Well, if you even just do a spot satellite photograph, okay, they're here. By the time that missile gets there, they could be 40, 50 knots away. Well, maybe not 40, but 20 knots away. Ocean's a big place to start looking. But if you have constant updated data, and that satellite's watching those warships trying to steam the hell out of the area, and it's going, well, okay, coordinate here, coordinate here, coordinate here. It's constantly updating the coordinates, and the missile's just kiting on it in live action gameplay there. So it changes everything. It changes the dynamic, because all of a sudden the U.S. Navy can't run that far. If it runs far enough that the hypersonics can't get to it, which is 2,000 kilometers, it's not capable of carrying any missions out. You're going to have to do you have to do continuous refueling of these air refueling of the planes. And then you get the problem is the air refuelers are basically just big sitting, very explosive targets for air defense. And then the Baidu, while the Russian system can pick a target up 500 kilometers out, these things I think are like 700 or 800 kilometers out. So it gives you a lot of time to react to anything that's coming in and prepare it. It's not going to be last minute. And the best part of it, even the S-400s can detect stealth. These systems can detect stealth at a much better level. So the B-2s or the F-35s have a big problem, because once you strip away the stealth from an F-35, really, I won't maybe say third rate, but it's definitely a second rate airplane. And the Su-35s, is more than a match for the F-35s. It carries more munitions, it has a longer range, and it can engage a longer range. And if it can see them, their main power there is stealth, and it's gone. So they're going to have big problems. And what happens when American pilots die? Nobody will admit to it. That's what happens. They'll all die in auto crashes somewhere out, somewhere in America. So that's how they're usually written off. Now, if a ship gets hit, that's a little harder to write off. If an aircraft carrier gets hit, it's not going to sink, because sinking an aircraft carrier is very difficult. I mean, they're gigantic, and they have hundreds of airtight compartments in them. So sinking an aircraft carrier is very difficult. Damaging the tarmac's relatively easy if you can hit it. And once that's done, there's no point in the aircraft carrier being around, because it can't do anything. It can't land, and it can't take off planes. But again, if capital ships are hit, that's kind of hard to deny. If there's mass casualty events happening on American bases all around, that's hard to deny. But another thing that nobody's talking about, if this conflict gets framed as a Shiite versus Sunni conflict, America's going to have a few less allies before this is all over. Because if you start looking at it, never mind the Shiite militias that are active in in Iraq, which is a Shia government that's been asking the U.S. to get the hell out for the last 10 years. And the U.S. has been going, go pound sand. Well, those U.S. forces are about to get surrounded deep in Indian country. Except the Indians are firing mortar rounds, RPGs, and maybe even artillery. And now what do you do? And the ones in Syria are even worse off. And drones, too. So things get really very difficult now, because you've got islands of American troops that are not going to be separated out from everybody else in a full conflict. But then you get countries like Bahrain as an example. That country is 80% Shia, and they're a second-class people. The 20% Sunni are the elites.
Oh,
Yeah.
Dustin, you still there? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, the 20% Sunni in Bahrain are the elites, or Qatar, which is, I think, got a population, an Arabic population that are citizens, anyways, of like 500,000. It's got about 9 or 10 million wage slaves basically working there at different levels, and mostly young men. That's a country that can easily not become the country it was before, for obvious reasons. So they've got a lot of problems in that area, and even the Saudis. The Saudis, the Saudis have this little problem that the Shia tribes are sitting right on top of all the oil. So, and they're not a small minority. They're not, I think, 30 or 40% minority. So if this becomes an inter religious war, things are going to get very, very interesting very, very quickly. And the U.S. may have a lot fewer allies in that area because these regimes will get toppled.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a point that is not being talked about too much right now, Stas. But if you could, right now the Trump administration is framing all of this as, the U.S. has the capacity to essentially destroy Iran, and it's just making certain choice. It wants to make certain choices that will essentially maximize its capability to get what it quote unquote wants, which is what it claims: no more nuclear weapons, build up, all of this nonsense. But the point here I wanted to ask you about, Stas, was what exactly is the U.S.'s capacity in a conflict like this? We've seen other conflicts in the past. The U.S. raising Iraq and Afghanistan in certain ways, occupying Afghanistan. Ukraine, the proxy war, disaster, but now the U.S. is going into a different kind of conflict, it seems like, and it's certainly speaking a big game. I'm curious about what your overall assessment is of what it can do given the array of forces it has built up.
Well, Iraq was an interesting point because, first of all, in some ways, Saddam was an idiot. He never actually believed he was going to get attacked in Desert Storm. Because he could have, if he'd chosen for the first couple of months of that buildup, he could have just ridden right over the U.S. forces there. I had friends who were deployed there early on, airborne forces, light infantry. They would have been just crushed. Never mind, most of them were suffering from dysentery. So, we're just laying on our couch for the first 3 weeks because we got bad camel meat because it was sourced locally from the Saudis. And nobody could do anything. Everybody was suffering from dysentery. Saddam didn't do anything. He waited and waited until he was attacked, and allowed the U.S. and its allies to build up. He did the same thing the second time. I mean, why would you wait? And it even got worse in the second time because the CIA was very active, and half the Iraqi army never left its barracks. And even with that, and the U.S. Army in 2003 was already a much degraded force compared to 1991. And that's still, by the way, 1991 took 6 months of buildup, the physical buildup, to invade, with nobody interdicting American traffic coming in, plenty of friendly ports, even had the Syrian army there. I mean, everybody was there for that little joyride. In 2003, it took, when Trump's like, I'll do it in a week. It took the U.S. military, counting half the Iraqi army never left their barracks, it took the U.S. military 22 days to reach Baghdad. I mean, the British did it a lot faster in World War I. If we're going to count on that. It still took them 22 days to reach Baghdad. And that's the ground force. There wouldn't be no ground force invasion. There will be proxies. There will be proxies that will get activated, which is, by the way, why Russia's bringing in Mi-28 Black Shark helicopters to deal with these proxies. They keep them basically bottled up, help the Iranian army keep them bottled up while this is going on, when the missile war is going on, and then when it's done, to wipe them out, drive them into the ground. But outside of American proxies, the U.S. is not going to be. The U.S. doesn't have nearly the ground forces if it could ever even gather them. I mean, how would they get there? That's the whole point. You can't sail up the Persian Gulf while there's a war going on. You get sunk. trying to land them in Israel, you'd get sunk because the Iranians start hitting the Israeli ports. It'll probably hit the port of Haifa again, which it did a huge amount of damage to last time in the 12-day war. I mean, they burned a good chunk of that commercial port of Haifa. There were even a couple cruise ships burned out, still sitting around because of the fuel explosions. I don't know how many people got incinerated in that little fireball. Probably not more than a few. Not that the Israeli government would ever admit to it. But they didn't even want to admit to the photos that were coming out from people taking them. It was a Holocaust. It looked like after a Holocaust, fire Holocaust. But yeah, you can't get the ground invasion, so all you're down to is missiles. Well, then you get the problem. Well, first of all, if the Tomahawks are going to be performing anything they performed in Nigeria, and the U.S. already has other problems. Of the 12 Tomahawks fired, 4 of them failed to explode, didn't detonate. And the warheads were found and photographed. So you already got problems. That's a 33% failure rate to detonate. Yeah, so you still got the ordnance there, and then what? It's just lying around a big piece of metal with high explosive inside of it. So that's already saying something about the quality of the munitions. And then, look, the Gerald Ford is a prime example. This is the flagship of the American fleet. Okay, we'll ignore the feces jokes. This is a ship that's been out to sea for 8 months. This is a very complicated system. I'm not talking about the people. The people are complicated enough. And believe me, they want to stretch their legs. You try being out to sea for 8 months, even if it's a giant ship the size of the Ford, which has its own little pseudo restaurants inside and a barber shop, things like that. It's got a crew of 5,000 people. You still want to walk somewhere on a shoreline after 8 friggin' months. So your people are degraded. Already your people are degraded. Their quality degraded because they have not had a break in 8 months. And it looks like it's not gonna. At least on its website, it's saying they'll come back to port sometime in late April. So morale's got to be down already. But then there's the problem of an integrated system where if anything starts to go, it's a cascading effect. For example, if everything is true about the floating lakes of shite, well, let's see what else can go wrong. Bacteria growth, right? So we start with bacteria growth. Are your air filter systems able to filter out that much bacteria? Spores are going everywhere. If they can't, you start to get people sick. It may get into the food, and you have, never mind the extra moisture buildup that could affect electronics, and you have cascading effect. One bad thing starts breaking another thing that starts breaking another thing, and it's just like society in any complicated machine. The more complicated the machine is, the more weak points it has that can just do the cascading effect and start breaking other systems in it or degrading other systems. And you can't fix that at sea. You have to take that into a port that's capable of servicing a ship that size, which is a pretty damn big ship. And there are that many ports that are going to be able to take a ship that size and have the crew that can actually go and fix these systems. So you've got a very short window of opportunity if you're going to do it, because unless you got another aircraft carrier group coming in to replace the Ford, you've got issue. And by the way, the Ford has about 14 ships with it as part of its carrier group. All those people haven't been ashore for a long time either, and they are much smaller ships. So everybody's performance is degraded. The morale is going to be degraded. And, if you have to stand in lines to take a dump, and then half the ship stinks like, and people start coming down with chloria and other diseases, because, by the way, they're in the middle of the central Mediterranean, and the temperature is already well above freezing in the plus temperatures, and it's only going to get hotter. You've got issues. You've got really serious issues. So what can they do? If this turns into a several-month war, they're not going to be able to hold this. The ships are incapable. They're worn out. I've talked to naval guys that were officers, and they're like, the state of the U.S. Navy is pathetic right now. The men are worn out. The ships are worn out. Everybody's worn out. They're constantly running all over the world to show the colors of the empire. Yeah, and people are pretty much so done. Somebody was even suggesting, I don't know if this is true or not, that this might have been the reason the toilets went, may have been a soft mutiny. Basically, the sailors do that by flushing their T-shirts down the toilet and clogging them up that way to force the ship to go to port. It may have been that. I don't know. I can't say yes or no to that. So, but there's a lot of issues, and it goes across. The Navy's probably the worst hit right now, but it goes across the other services too. And when casualties start rolling up, what do? Do you go nuclear? In that case, you got a lot of other problems. As far as Israel's screwed either way. I mean, Netanyahu will get to stay in power, but at the expense, in a long war, the expense of basically Israel ceasing to exist as an economic state. I mean, its borders may still be there. It may still have a military, but the amount of damage it'll suffer, and the amount of damage in industry and commerce it'll suffer, it's going to be a dead-end economic state. It'll be in a state of total depression economically. And it's already bleeding young people left and right. People are just up and leaving. No, I'm tired of this. Screw this. And not a few of America's settlers are leaving, but because you've got to be a special kind of guy to go leave the U.S., go to Israel, burn somebody out, or drive or kill somebody from their house, take it over and say, "Yeah, that's mine now," because I was promised that. 3,000 years ago. And those people seem to also, when the other side starts shooting back or the missiles start firing, those people leave. Interestingly enough, they suddenly remember, I still got an American passport. And they get a plane and fly right back out. So it's Israel, they want that war. Better be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you really get it.
Yeah, great points. I mean, these problems, Stas, we don't hear about them with regard to the U.S. military with Israel. But one thing we are definitely hearing about is that there are rising oil prices already in the lead up to this war. And we are hearing more and more that Iran is conducting drills, preparing for this, literally doing target practice on the UAE, a base that houses 5,000 U.S. troops. So Iran is obviously preparing. So do you see this as different than, given all that we've talked about with the Russian-Chinese support, given how Iran has approached this, do you see this as fundamentally different than how Saddam, in your example there, just waited and waited and waited? Is this waiting more of preparation for the attack to come, or do you see a similar error being made?
Iran is showing it's trying to show its teeth without being too aggressive, but there's an interesting point there. They temporarily closed the Straits of Hormuz for missile fire and training, but the point was it wasn't just Iran. The Russian Navy was there, and the Chinese Navy had ships there. So this was three navies going at it, and having maneuvers, which is a direct threat to tell Donald Trump and the neocons of, do you really want to do this? Additionally, Iran has a deep rear. It's called Russia. So Russia has already said, and they will, if need be, down the Caspian Sea, bring in diesel, food, and so on to help Iran weather any of the damages. So Russia can provide quite a few assets as needed. It's got a huge manufacturing base, the fourth or fifth largest manufacturing base in the world, and produces just about everything it needs. So that's a big friend to have in your rear when your enemy is up front. So, if I was the Europeans in the EU in this case, I'd be a lot more intelligent than they are. But if I was the EU at this point, I'd be screaming and begging, don't do this. Because, like I said, they're going to physically run out of oil. As soon as those straits are closed, and Iran has said, we're going to close the straits as the first thing. That's it. They're done. And then there begins a disruption. And it's not just a matter of oil probably hit about $120, maybe to $200, and that's going to be a big whack. Americans will suffer. America has more or less enough oil for itself. But prices are market prices. Prices will go up. So then the Trump administration has one of two unpopular moves, one very unpopular and one somewhat unpopular, and definitely won't get them any brownie points on the next elections. They can either nationalize the oil companies, which would be probably the bridge too far, or they have to walk in and they set price ceilings. Either way, alternatively, they can just dump the reserves onto the market. But again, that all depends how long this conflict goes before those oil reserves run out. Get the critical low lows. And they'll still not have a full effect if prices are spiking out, because the American companies are also looking at the market and go, hey, it's $150 a barrel. Why am I selling oil internally equivalent to about $100 a barrel, or $80 a barrel, $70 a barrel? Let's go market value. The only way to fight that back is to flood the market with oil from the reserves, but that's a limited capacity of what you can do. So then you have to enter into the market stream. Otherwise, you wind up with gasoline costing $7, $8, $9, $10, $12 a gallon, and you watch just what's left of the gutted and starving and dying American middle class just go ahead and just hang itself, because that's it. Game's over. So the last one out of the economy, switch the lights off. That type of level. But that's going to be, and all of a sudden the MAGA, the people who are left in MAGA and were cheering Trump on, are going to suddenly realize, you thought the tariffs were bad. Yeah. Welcome to everything else there, buddy, that runs on oil. But at least they'll have oil. The Europeans will, and certain other countries will literally not have oil. Because the oil market supply and demand are very close to each other, to the level of equilibrium. And maybe a little bit more supply, maybe a little less supply than demand, but it more or less balances out. Here, all of a sudden, 36% of the world's oil isn't going to market anymore. And even worse, if all of a sudden the oil platforms are getting damaged, then you're really looking long term. You can open up the Straits of Hormuz again, but if half the oil platforms, refineries, and everything else are burning, oh crap! Now what do you do? This is a month long, if not a year
And
long.
Stas, Iran has hit those before, right? I mean, Iran, I believe, did take aim some years ago at Saudi Arabia's oil fields. No,
they have, and I think the U.S. is going to go after the Iranian oil fields. So those will get damaged too. The U.S. will definitely go after that. Israel really wants them destroyed. But the point is that's still capacity. That even if you're taking Iran off the market, that's already cut in capacity. That means prices go up. And believe you, China can outbid most of Europe easily on the additional oil, and Russia can supply, at least in the short term, surge supply China with what it needs. But the point is, those oil tankers that are taking the oil via India or some other country, secondary, trinary tankers to Russian oil to Europe, so they can say it's not Russian oil, are suddenly all going to dry up, because countries like China and India are going to take it for themselves, because they're going to need it when the Gulf goes, and the Europeans are just going to be screwed. I mean, quite literally, welcome to running out of gasoline, diesel. Welcome to running out of fuel oil. Welcome to running out of LNG. And now what do? Your whole society collapses, because at the end of the day, even if you have a great rail network and it runs on electricity, sooner or later you still have to have a truck to take it from the railhead or the rail station to whatever store it's going to get sold in. And when you don't have that, you don't have enough horses left in Europe to really pull things like that. And horses don't breed that fast. And you obviously get economic problems and collapses. So we're going to live and see. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting. And final question to you, Stas, as we close here. What impact will this war, it's coming, it's going to happen at some point. We see the Trump administration. You saw the State of the Union address. He's, constantly making threats, saying diplomacy first. Of course, these so-called talks are going to exhaust very fast. So the question is, what will be the global effects beyond the economic, because we already have Russia, China involved here. We have regional war being promised by Iran. Seems like the U.S. is opening a big can of worms here.
Well, the Mitterrand level of diplomacy that comes from the master diplomat Witkoff, I just don't know why they haven't capitulated. Yeah, that's the point. They're not going to capitulate. Jesus, oh, good Lord, have mercy. The idiots that are running diplomacy in the U.S. and a lot of other things. I thought Biden was bad. My God, we've beaten Biden. Blinken was an evil bastard, but Blinken kind of wanted his kids to grow up, A, and B, had some kind of more rational, logical thought. I can't believe I'm actually naming positive qualities about Blinken.
And the rationality was bad stuff. So we all agree on this. It was rationality toward, building up toward Cold War, escalation, all of that. But it was still, yes, it was definitely that. It was definitely rational.
I mean, when you're starting to praise people like Blinken, it's like, holy crap, how far we've come. Oh my God. Yeah,
we didn't think we would. We didn't think we would ever do that, but here we are. Anyway.
You thought we were in the basement. No, we blew the basement up and we found a sub-basement. Then we blew that one up and we found another. And we just keep digging, man. There's got to be a pit of hell somewhere down there.
I love that to say we're very close to hell. We're getting hot. We're getting hot.
Anytime, and just when you think, there is a Russian saying, всегда может быть хуже. It can always be worse. And we're hitting that always be worse. There you go. Frick, man. It's insane. Like I said, I wasn't holding great torches and praying to the statue of Trump, the Almighty, but I figured it's got to be better than Biden, at least on some level better than Biden. No, I was wrong. I was actually wrong. Well, not actually. I've been wrong plenty of times, but I was very wrong in this case. It was like, holy crap! Every day, the number one, take away the friggin' telephone from this man and have a filter before he hits send on anything. Allow him 5 minutes or 10 minutes to write some stupid post once a day. That's it. So at least everybody can react to it, because from breakfast to lunch to midday brunch to dinner to the midnight snack of cookies, milk, and a toilet break, and everything's changed 20 times already. So it's unpredictability at a Macron level. This actually, I think he beats Macron now in unpredictability, which you don't want in international politics, especially with dealing with countries with nuclear weapons. You really want predictability. You want to know A is going to go to B, B is going to go to C, and there's no Z in between. You want to understand how this is going to flow. And you got people like this that are just crap. Yeah, you don't know what, and the logic in any of these countries that have nuclear first strike capability. Yeah, Russia, China, other countries, they may not say we're going to do first strike. The U.S. does hold first strike doctrine. Right. But any country that can do first strike, when you don't know what the other guy's doing, and you're afraid he may actually go first strike, the logic of geopolitics and military standoff says strike first. And that's what pushes it. You don't want that. I mean, that's how you wind up in a nuclear war. So you want predictability. You want people that you can look at him and go, he's a bastard, but he's a predictable bastard. We can kind of figure out what he's going to do. You don't want some guy that jumps around 20 times in a day and turns around 5 times, flips, does 2 backflips, and God only knows where you're at afterwards. He's playing 5D checkers at this point. I will say this, it depends. Best case scenario, the very, very best case scenario, Trump sends a frigate up to the Straits of Hormuz to go, see, they're afraid of us. They're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz. And then everybody goes home. The chances of that are probably 0.0.01, if that much. Right. Worst case scenario, we're in a nuclear war. And we all die and we don't see summer. Which really would piss me off because we had a massively snowy winter this year. It just won't stop.
Yeah, so tell me about it.
I want summer, damn it, and not a nuclear summer. I don't want little pieces of the sun popping up right above my forehead. Right. Yeah, not that kind of summer. But that's the worst case scenario. So, okay, so between that and that, we start looking at what else could be in the mix. The U.S. may go for a death by 1,000 cuts. Iran looks like it's not going to go play that. It's just going to go death by 1,000 cuts, and here's my battle axe above your upside your head, and let's just go full stream. So that's one way. Iran could collapse. That's always a possibility. There are internal factors, but I don't think those are going to play out. That's what the U.S., by the way, is counting on. They always keep counting on that. That's what they were counting on Maidan that failed. That's what they're counting on the beheading attacks that the Israelis launched in the summer, a 12-day war. That didn't happen. So Iran will probably not collapse. It could very quickly become a regional war if Iran, when Iran activates its militias in Iraq and there's a fighting that starts there. It could easily become a fight with Jelani. And whatever NATO issues become with Jelani, Syria, but whatever NATO issues they might have thought with Turkey, when the Israelis started going, and Turkey is next, if really you even aim that, you don't say that out loud, but they did. And the Turks are not they're not blind, deaf, or dumb. They kind of were figuring out what was going to be. And we were told that, as soon as we're done with them, then you. The Turks aren't exactly going to be out to help the U.S. succeed here, especially the Israelis. So it could very easily turn into a regional conflict. Which way the monarchies in the Gulf states go, I don't know. It's going to be one of those hit and miss. Depends how much they're damaged. Depends how their economies suffer. There's so many factors here. It's a guess, but it's going to be interesting to comment on as we analyze this. Show.
Well, actually, I had one final question, actually, Stas, since you are a former U.S. Army officer. I want to put myself in the shoes of those right now who are deployed out to everywhere, not just the USS Gerald Ford, which is having which is circling the drain in many ways with its poop problems.
the jokes write themselves. The jokes literally write themselves. The comments I had on my video were just great.
It's going to be a meme for a long time from here on out. But everywhere, right? Because you have thousands upon thousands. Marco Rubio said, right, 30 to 40K all across West Asia, all across these countries with U.S. bases in them. So I can only imagine how it must. I don't know if you've ever been in an experience like this where you have leadership saying you're going to go to war eventually, but being very unclear about when that's going to be, getting to the point of going to war. What is it? Twice? It's striking twice. Putting yourself in that position, and then you have a situation where you're also seeing parts of the leadership in the Trump administration, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, for example. I'm sure people are hearing this. I can't imagine this is a secret since it's in the mainstream media, that they're worried about what could happen with the strike. I don't know how it works in the military. My father was, just a grunt guy in Vietnam. He wasn't really privy to the decision making or any of this. But I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where the people above you are saying you're going to go to war, but some of them are saying, oh, this isn't a good idea. And how does that affect things? Because it sounds like there could be big problems with this within the ranks. Are people just going to drop all of this and say, okay, we'll just do what we're told? How does this go? Because there could be casualties on the U.S. side, big ones.
There could be. There will be.
No,
look, dealing with idiot generals, and most of these generals are idiots. They're not picked for being bright men. The good colonels, they usually leave as colonels, or as captains, or as majors, or as lieutenant colonels. The guys that get promoted to general for at least the last 30 years, more and more, and I'd say probably overwhelmingly now, are the guys that kiss ass better than everybody else. They're woke. Today they're woke, tomorrow they're conservative. Whatever the master wants, master's gonna get, because I'm gonna serve the master. That's damn right. We're gonna serve that master, because you know what? When I retire, I get the big bucks. I go to CNN, I go to Fox, I become a director on the board of directors of Raytheon or something like that, and I make the big money. So sure, whatever the master wants, the master's gonna get. It's not this is my honor, and I say this is bad, and we shouldn't do this, and I will resign my commission as a protest. which isn't what an officer should do. They're never going to do that. They're going to say, whatever, yes, sir, whatever, sir, you want, let's go, sir. They may protest quietly, but they will never, I mean, with very rare exceptions. The commander in CENTCOM, he quit over the destruction of the speedboat or the fishing boats, speedboats, whatever boats that were going on in the Caribbean around Venezuela. But that's unique for the U.S. military for the last 30 years. Absolutely unique. One-offs. And as the Russian saying goes, исключение только поддерживает закон, the exception only upholds the rule. And the rule is these generals are chosen because they're yes men. These generals are chosen because they will tell the master what he wants to hear. The master sits in Washington, or the masters sit in Washington, and they're going to hear what they want to hear. And that's the problem. But believe you me, the junior officers and most of the enlisted, particularly the NCOs, they all understand this. Because they've all had that experience. They've all run into these generals. Everybody understands this. Will they quit and mutiny? No, they won't. They'll carry out their mission as best they can and try to stay alive through it. Will they be in a absolute shitstorm? Maybe not as bad if there's one in the Mediterranean on the Ford, but yes, they will be in an absolute shitstorm because they're going to be isolated, they're going to be surrounded, particularly if they're in Iraq or Syria. They're going to be getting smacked from every direction. You're basically, you're the little wooden fortress in the middle of the prairie, and all the Indians got together and they're going to burn you out. That's the type of mentality here. Except again, the Indians are now armed with mortars, RPGs, maybe light artillery higher than mortars, drones, and everything else. So it gets a little more hairy than that. Is help coming? Probably not, because all the U.S. bases are now under fire in the region. So yeah, I mean they'll serve as best they can, but will the leadership basically hang them out to dry? Yeah. They'll hang them out to dry. Not the first time. So yeah, it's not going to be those guys sitting right now in Syria or those guys sitting in Iraq in those areas. They know it's coming. They damn well know it's coming.
How about the UAE? You're right across the way. If you're in the UAE, they only have to use their shortest, slowest missiles to hit you there.
But in the UAE, at least the population of the UAE isn't trying to kill you. It's just the missiles coming down your throat. They're trying to kill you. If you're in Iraq or you're in Syria, everybody's trying to take a whack at you, including the missiles that are coming down on your head. So
this is true.
Many fold worse. But yeah, either way, these guys, they're screwed. I mean, the moment the fire starts, those bases all around, especially the short range, they're getting cruise missiles. There's 3 classes of cruise missiles that have a 500-kilometer range. They're 300 and 500 kilometers. They're coming in. They're coming in dead on, and the U.S. does not have enough interceptor missiles to stop them, flat out. Particularly, since they have to defend the owners of the U.S. and D.C. Israel in this case. So, so I think I got a feeling that the American bases are going to be second rung to Israel in this case. Should it be that way? Probably not. Will it be that way? Oh, hell yes. So, I feel for those guys. They're in the middle of, they signed up to serve the country and protect the rights. American rights somehow keep getting lost in Afghanistan. They keep
going over there.
They're I mean, they're never sure how the hell Saddam Hussein stole America's rights, or they got lost in the desert, wound up in Syria on the oil fields. But somehow America's rights, that Constitution likes to wander. The Bill of Rights, anyways, likes to wander. So defending America's rights in foreign countries by occupying them and stealing their resources. I don't know if the founding fathers ever saw that one coming. Maybe they should have thought about that a little bit and put something else in there. But that's what it's like, and those guys are screwed, absolutely screwed. I mean, just down to very basics. This is a long-term deal. Even if the locals aren't trying to kill you, what happens when your food runs out? What happens when your provisions run out? I mean, if you're deep enough on some of these smaller bases, you're going to have a hard life surviving all of this. Especially if this is a long-term attrition. They're going to have to be evacuated out, or it gets very interesting trying to pull resources in. Especially, and then again, when the militias are active, you try getting a convoy in with food and supplies to some remote location. So yeah, that's going to be it's going to be a shitstorm.
Yeah.
And all the rats are going to abandon Trump real quick. You're going to see things in Washington that you haven't seen since hell, probably ever. This is going to be worse because whatever loyalty or discipline or whatever positive characteristics most of Congress maybe once had, if they ever had it, they're all gone. I mean, you could count the number of good people in Congress on two hands, maybe I'll give them two hands out of the 550 some members. And the soldiers, we're going to take care of the soldiers by putting them in zones where they can get killed. That's not taking care of the soldiers.
No. Stas, it was great to be with you. We're going to head out together. I think I'm just going to make sure I thank everyone who became a member, who gave a super chat. Thank all of you. I'm pulling you all up on the screen right now. Stas, I have your YouTube channel in the video description so people can subscribe there, and they should, because you're doing your own work in your own right. And definitely it should be checked out. Somebody said poop mutiny. That's funny. And then the last one, it was a question. It says, Stas, is it true Iran sells oil via the Caspian Sea to Russia, buys on a train, sells to China? Once the oil is in Russia, it can end up anywhere. And it's a little bit worded strangely, but I don't know.
Right now, no. I have never heard of that going up into Russia. Russia sells oil to Iran. To Iran, I'm sorry. Russia sells diesel to Iran because Iran has problems getting enough refined petroproducts, even though it has refiners, but it's not enough. I guess you could transfer oil up into Astrakhan, but the problem is what do you do with it? Because there are no pipelines, and pushing it on a train and driving it out to Siberia on a train, that gets pretty expensive pretty fast. Yeah. I mean, the Russian, the more remote Russia, they're in southern Russia, there are oil fields, north of Kazakhstan. There are oil fields in other areas, obviously in the Caucasus. The big oil fields in Siberia, they have pipelines running. The Druzhba that ran to Europe, there's an oil pipeline that goes directly to China that they're planning. By the way, there's negotiation going on right now to extend it through Bangladesh and into India and secure that whole area. Iran could, but I don't see the logic in it. It would make the oil super expensive. Iran ships their oil through the Gulf. Not the Gulf, through just the Strait of Hormuz, to the edge of the Gulf and into the Indian Ocean. And a lot of those ships are going to India. India was paying, skirting sanctions by just paying in gold. You get rid of the US dollar out of the whole mix. They have no idea what the hell's what you're doing. Which you have no transponders on the ships too, on top of that. So in that case, they would de-dollarize a long time ago. But going north is, I don't think it works. And then there's the question of Azerbaijan and what Azerbaijan is going to do. Because Azerbaijan there's a U.S. base. They don't admit to it, but there is one. And then there's an Israeli base there too. If Azerbaijan activates and starts sending drones, and the drones have hit a couple of Russian tankers in the Caspian. Witnesses are saying they flew out of Azerbaijan. They weren't Ukrainian drones. I mean, you look where Azerbaijan is and where the Astrakhan is and figure out those flew across how many levels of Russian air defense to get there. Nobody noticed. Yeah, kind of hard to believe. Out of Azerbaijan, that's a whole different issue. Now, if Azerbaijan starts playing in, I think that country is going to disappear. Because between Russia and Iran, it's not going to be an Azerbaijan if they go full Ukraine stupid. But they may that could be an issue too, or the U.S. and Israeli bases there will just drag them into that fight, screaming and kicking. Maybe, I don't know. So there'll be maybe a couple countries disappearing before this is over. We'll see. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
It's easy to start a war. It's harder to guide a war, and it's even harder to end a war. because the war starts to take on its own logic. It starts to take out its own life. It becomes its own soul and life, and it's very hard to predict where it goes. And each round of choices become narrower and narrower for most politicians. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't think Trump's ever considered most of this. But definitely some of the people around him never have.
Yeah. Well, Stas, it was great to be with you. We're going to head out together. I want to make sure everyone hits the like button as we depart here. That will keep the show boosted so more people can hear Stas, more people can hear our first guest. Yeah.
Check me out on X too. It's Stanislav Krapivnik. I couldn't fit the whole name. It's our name.
I'll put those Russian names. All right, let me.
I know. We feel more important a lot, and we also have our patronym, so it's another long name attached in the middle of it. So like 3 long names. We like to have lots of letters. We learn to read early just so we can write our own names.
Well, your X is in the video description now. So as we head out, you can check it out, everyone. Hit the like button before you depart from the program. If you watch the live show all the way through, be sure to check out all of Stas's resources in the video description, as well as the ones in there to support this show from Patreon, Substack, and much more. And until next time, everybody, I'll be back. It looks like probably this coming Saturday, the last day of February. So I'll let you know what's going on then. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Hopefully we'll all be here still.